Hello. Hi, this is Michelle from Eerie River Publishing, and today we are talking about our newest release, and that is After, which is a post-apocalyptic survivor series. And we've got 8 different books in here by 8 different authors, and all of them really kind of delve into that idea of what the world would be like after a post-apocalyptic situation. So we're really excited to see you guys and to see our authors and get a little bit more information about this awesome collection. Now, Eerie River Publishing, we are a small independent publishing house outside of, in Ontario, Canada. We specialize in dark fiction. So we do horror and dystopian horror now. Dark fantasy, all that kind of stuff. So we hope you enjoy. And now, so what I'm going to do is introduce our authors. So we have Holley, Cornetto, Chris, Hewitt, and Joel, our hunt. So give me 1 second. I'm going to just add everyone to the stream. Hello, Holley. And Chris. Hello. And Joel. Hi, how are you guys doing today?
Good. Really good, thank you.
Yeah. Better now?
Better now? That's good. It's like a really rainy and gray day where I am. How are you guys faring? Did you have a good day?
It's mostly been sunny, except for the time that I stepped outside and then decided it wanted to shut down. But other than that, yeah, it's been a reasonably nice day.
All right, that's perfect.
It was nice here. We took our dogs to the dog park and went for a little hike this morning. So it was wonderful. Starting to enjoy the fall vibes. The leaves are changing. It's gorgeous.
I know the leaves are changing where I am too. We're starting to see a lot of red and gold and orange, and it's amazing. I love this season. It's like my favorite season ever, the spooky season.
Same.
So we've got a couple of people here. If you are here, just remember to say hi in the comments. Hello, Undead Dad reads. They are a big fan of ours, and we see them a lot on Instagram. So we love seeing all of our followers following and just being a part of the adventure. So After, which is this one, this is the collection of all of the books together. And I think Chris has all of the little books.
Oh, yeah. A ton of them.
I'm like, not all of mine have actually come.
So why carry all these when
you can grab this?
You can grab.
So this book came about because I had this amazing idea of what would happen if the world ended, kind of thing. Not ended, but if civilization was pretty much rendered extinct. Something happened. What kind of event would happen, and then what would human civilization be like after that? And you guys really kind of took that idea and ran with it. And I love how everyone had such a unique idea and a unique premise to not only what happened, but what the world would be like after. It got pretty dark for all of us because obviously an apocalypse, I don't necessarily think is ever like an exciting event, as we can tell by COVID. So, so Holley, why don't you tell us a little bit about what inspired your story, and kind of what to expect? Because we are going to do a little bit of a reading from everyone's stories in a little bit.
Okay, so with my story is called Carry On, and here's a copy of the paperback of mine. So when we were discussing the stories and what this was going to be, I had the challenge, I suppose, of I have never written anything in this kind of setting before. So I really had to sit down and think, what would be a scary post-apocalyptic story for me? Like what is, scary in this instance for me? And for me personally, I think the answer came in that it's only scary if it's something I think could really happen for me. So I went very realistic with my story. my story begins with global warming having devastated the world. Resources are being fought over, and it has caused a second civil war in the United States of America. And so the main, I guess, narrative of my story follows a group of some ex-military, some that were stationed in different bunkers, because that's where my people have gone to survive. And they're trying to navigate this new world, and they face struggles, they have decisions they have to make. And I don't want to give away too much, but I guess in my story, I wanted to make it as character focused as I could, while again trying to keep it pretty realistic in terms of things that could possibly happen. So there's not like supernatural occurrences or anything like that really in the story. It's very realism based.
Yeah, which is really terrifying because there are a lot of things that could happen or even see us going in that kind of direction right now, right? Did anyone else take their kind of off of something that they think that could actually happen, or is it all just kind of imagination?
Nah, imagination. I hope it doesn't happen.
I know. Could you imagine?
I think we all hope none of it happens.
Yeah, like I don't think anyone's rooting for the destruction of humankind. Well, maybe we are.
There should be a poll out of the various scenarios, which is the one everyone's most comfortable with.
Exactly.
But then I think I'd worry that like if my situation won that, I'd think I'd evidently not gone dark enough, and I'd want to rewrite it to make it more horrible.
Yours went pretty dark, actually. Yeah, yours went really dark too. Well, maybe we should. Yeah, I was just thinking that. Well, when you guys, was there any like when I set out this kind of challenge of doing something like that? Did any of you guys have any other, like, what was your initial reaction to it? Like, what did you think when you were like, oh, this is a strange thing?
So for me, I have a very, I think, quite interesting relationship with post-apocalyptic fiction, because for a long time it was absolutely my favorite genre, just across all things: video games, films, books, and so I've read kind of just so many situations. And then it was only when I started trying to come at it as a writer that I realized I've seen so many different post-apocalyptic situations that I now struggle to think of one that I think feels, original and worth pursuing for me. So it's actually quite challenging for me to kind of come up with something that I don't immediately think like, oh yeah, that's what they did in Fallout. Oh yeah, that's what they did in The End of the Whole Mess. So for me, the challenge really was sitting there and trying to work out what I didn't immediately think that I'd read or watched somewhere before.
Yeah.
And hopefully I've achieved that. I'm sure there's a similar story out there somewhere. There usually is.
Yeah, well, they say there's no really original ideas anymore, just original people. So I would love, why don't we get into doing some of the readings? Does anyone want to go first? Does anyone like to volunteer? Okay.
I'll jump in there.
I was like, does anyone want to volunteer before I voluntold them? Okay, so you are going to go first, Chris. Why don't you, I'm going to say goodbye to Holley. And then goodbye to Joel. And then why don't you actually tell us, is there an inspiration behind this one? And I should have,
Yeah, I was going to say, to answer your previous question, if you recall, I went off and wrote the outlines for 2 different stories and completely missed the brief of after.
Yes.
Because the usually interesting piece is when it's happening, when the disaster is actually happening, as opposed to after all of that, all the box office stuff's happened.
Yeah.
What's the situation? So, having come up with 2 ideas and then realized that I completely misunderstood the requirements. And then I'd seen a number of comments about short story in It Calls from the Sky. that I had in there, which has gone completely out of my head. Thorn in my side.
I'm like, I have it
That's
right
it.
here.
Yeah. So I wrote a story in there, which was essentially an alien invasion story.
Yes. Thorn in My Side is what it was called.
Yeah.
And that is in this book. It Falls from the Sky.
Oh yeah, that's a good book. People should get
It
that.
is a good book. So that was
So
essentially then building
well, a
off
couple
of
of
this,
people
that
have
was the
basically said
prequel.
it's a shame because it kind of ends there, and then we'd like to see more. And then when I was scrabbling around for ideas after the other two didn't work out, I thought, right, okay, well, let's imagine this 30 years on. So yeah, essentially, Heart of Thorns, which is this one, is set 30 years after, I guess, the end of Thorn in My Side, and picks up with. There's only a couple of characters that actually make it.
Yeah.
No plot spoilers, but most people don't make it, except obviously the main character from the first story, the general. If anybody read that one, and an orphaned girl are the only three characters who sort of pick up. If you haven't read the first one, doesn't really matter. There's a few references to it in it, but it's really imagining that world that's now been terraformed by alien invaders.
Yeah.
That's pretty
And
much the
you do
story.
you do go into it like it's for people that are reading it just the first time. You don't have to go back and read it at all.
No,
first.
no, I deliberately.
This one is completely standalone, and it really does. It reads really well, and I feel like the world is very well fleshed out. Like I found it was an easy read, and really to just kind of like get right into it. So I'm excited to see what people think when they read it, and I'm going to leave this to you, and then you can just jump right in there.
Okie dokie.
All right.
So I'm going to read chapter 1 of Heart of Thorns, and shout when you've had enough. Aidan looked up into an alien sky, the only sky he'd ever known. A generation had been born under these turbulent indigo clouds. 3 decades passed since the alien invaders took control of the southern hemisphere, hijacking the planet's weather system. Now, purple lightning rippled across the darkening horizon, a filigree of fiery fingers exploring every pathway through the perpetual storm. Aidan watched in wonder, raven hair whipping in the wind. He'd studied the ionizing effects all his life, but never so close. Mesmerized by the spectacular fireworks, he didn't see the signal for the squad to stop. "You okay, Prof?" asked Private Coles, staring down at Aidan's crumpled body. Aidan groaned. They'd started calling him Prof a few days out, and he wasn't sure if it was altogether a term of endearment. Yeah, thought I saw a flower." The hulk of a private chuckled, holding out a calloused hand to yank the exhausted scientist to his feet. "Best not let Sarge catch you lying down on the job." Aidan rubbed his shoulder. There wasn't a part of him that didn't ache after the 3-week march through the Badlands. 30 miles a day might be a breeze for crack Marines, but he'd be lucky to do that distance in a year, pacing back and forth in the safety of his lab. The tall figure of Sergeant Harris approached, head bobbing, looking for the hold-up. Aidan brushed himself down. "Are we there yet, Sergeant?" 20 clicks out. Doable by nightfall if we don't keep stopping." Aidan couldn't hide his relief. "Great. I can't." The words died on his lips, gone with the wind. The squad and the world froze as if the Badlands held its breath. A spell only shattered by Sergeant Harris barking orders. Aidan felt the gentlest of breezes whip across his dried, cracked lips. Oh crap, the wind's changing. The strong northerly that had blown at their backs since they'd left the refuge of the rocks had vanished, replaced by a stiffening breeze from the south. The sergeant wasted little time organising his squad. In pairs, 10 yards out, 100 yards apart, find cover and hunker down until we know what we're dealing with. He turned to the big private. "Coles, you're with Lee, digging behind that boulder 50 yards back." Coles scanned the southern horizon, lost in thought. "Private, eyes on the prize." The big Marine snapped to attention. Yes, sir. As the squad scattered, Coles quick marched Aidan Lee ahead, positioning himself between his ward and the now gusting wind. Aidan considered complaining about the rough handling, but one look at the private's stony face told him playtime was over. Reaching the rock, Coles pushed Aidan against the weathered stone before unfolding his entrenching tool. Don't just stand there. Aidan jumped to, retrieving his shovel and matching the private stroke for stroke. Coles redoubled his efforts with every glance. Unable to contain his curiosity, Aidan followed his gaze. A sinister tide of dark urchins rolled towards them, the largest of the monstrosities only yards away, an ebony heart surrounded by innumerable razor-sharp spines. The terrible tumbleweed had no eyes, no ears, no obvious senses until you got too close, and the needles shot out like deadly harpoons. Coles pushed the paralyzed scientist into the trench and threw his heavy backpack on top of him before getting up, a look of resignation darkening his features. Aidan's world slowed as a thin, black spine skewered the Marine through the shoulder, ripping through flesh and bone before bursting from the private's hip. The Marine screamed, droplets of blood splattering Aidan's face as the spiny ball descended in a crushing wave that blotted out the light. He wedged himself hard against the rock as the monstrosity pressed down a deadly Iron Maiden. With death inches from his face and needles stabbing into the backpack clutched to his chest, Aidan closed his eyes and prayed for a quick end. When next he dared to peek, a jagged crack of light expanded from under the bed of needles. Coles still lived. The Marine stared at him, lips trembling as he wheezed through perforated lungs. For a moment, Aidan thought they might survive. But a rivulet of blood trickled from the Marine's nose, tracing his cheek until it dropped from his earlobe, and Aidan realized the man no longer touched the floor. Rather, he floated, twisting in a sickening, slow rotation. The rolling urchin lofted its helpless victim skywards until Cole's boots were higher than his head. The urchin rolled on, ripping the backpack from Aidan's grip, leaving him shaking, heart pounding. He watched the big Marine, a broken marionette, slide head first down the spines, and his muted gurgling ceased with a sickening crack. Aidan vomited as Coles rolled on, belongings tumbling from his pack onto the blood-soaked earth. More urchins followed, none as large as the horror that made for the horizon with its eviscerated spoils. Sergeant Harris arrived in a flurry of dust. You okay, son? Aidan nodded, staring after Coles. The sergeant followed his gaze. Fuck. Okay, let's get you out of here. Aidan clambered onto unsteady feet, leaning against the rock. The device? It's secure. I need to see it. Let's just get you... Sergeant, I need to check the device now. Unimpressed, Harris ground his teeth, the whiplash scar along his jaw flexing as he watched his fallen and yet still rising comrade vanish. Aidan feared the sergeant would call off the mission. Instead, he waved to one of the squad. Prof needs to check the device. A bearded, turban-clad Marine sprinted over, and Aidan unbuckled the straps of the backpack to reveal two metallic objects inside. Pushing the oxygen tanks aside, he set to unscrewing the end cap of a large, shiny container. Inside, 4 lights blinked green. Aidan sighed. His life work remained intact. Been treating it like my firstborn, Prof, said Private Yash Singh. Aidan replaced the cap and secured the straps. Thank you, Marine. Keep up the good work. Yash nodded. I'll get it there in one piece. The sergeant parted. Let's try that again. The sergeant patted Yash on the back as he fell into line. Keep us standing out in the open, son, and I can't give you the same assurance. Aidan nodded, remembering the promise he'd made to his mother. He might call the shots in his lab, but out here in the Badlands, he was a gust of wind away from becoming a shish kebab. Lead on, Sergeant. And I think we'll stop there. Come back.
Hi. That was a
Hello.
great reading, Chris.
All right, I only messed up a few bits of it.
No.
What I hadn't realised is the light in here is terrible, and I'm getting too old for reading.
You're getting too old.
Dim light.
That's funny. No, it's good. It's exciting to hear it start all over again, because I've been I've read it so many times, just to like hear it in your own voice, though, to put the inflections in certain areas. It's always really cool to see an author just get in it and read their own story. So that's excellent. If anyone's watching, if you have any questions, feel free to put anything in the comments. If you're watching through the YouTube, and we can the YouTube channel, we can answer anything for you. But yeah. We're having, sorry, I just had someone message that they're looking through YouTube, but they can't
Find it.
Did you get that message from Dave too?
No.
Okay.
Well, I might have, but I probably haven't read it.
You're like, I'm not looking at my phone right now.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
right. But yeah, so was there anything specifically that inspired your idea of like, okay, my post-apocalyptic event, or my apocalyptic event is going to be aliens?
Well, yeah, mainly because it was based on the previous story.
Yeah. Well, I meant even the first one though. Is there a reason why you were like?
The first one was actually a dream. The original story of that is like trying to come up with something unique for It Calls from the Sky, and knowing what everyone else would be doing in terms of, there are lots of well-trodden directions with it, and obviously I'd gone to sleep pondering it, or I'd seen something, probably some Great Barrier Reef program with sea urchins and whatever. And I just had this dream where we're driving along, and this massive sea urchin just landed on the front of the car. And pretty much
like,
wrecking everybody. Aha! Now there's an idea. Well, in one of those rare instances, when you wake up and you think, I'm going to have to write this one down before.
Right. Like before I forget it.
Yeah.
So that is what inspired the one from It Calls from the Sky, and then that again.
And then really
ends up being a prequel.
I think it was a good choice. Yeah, I think it was a good choice because a number of people had actually said, and then what happens then, and then.
Yeah. No, we had a lot of people commenting on that story and for in reviews and stuff like that. So it was definitely a standout story, and I know people loved it. So
give the people what they want. That's
exactly. So I hope that they really enjoy it in after. And again, you can buy this with an ebook where it has all of the series, or you can get individually Heart of Thorns is Chris Hewitt's. And you can get it paperback or even hardcover. Yeah.
If you're running a marathon,
so little when you see it like that compared to like
if you're going for a run
of a book, right?
Or sporon size, as Tim calls it.
Sporon size, exactly.
That one isn't.
Okay, so I think it's excellent story, and I hope people really enjoy like where you went with it and everything else when they read it, because it is really kind of the world you created is really unique, and the characters in it is really awesome as well. So I hope people enjoy that. Okay, so I'm going to say, well, does anyone have any questions for Chris? Dave was saying he had a issue being able to comment on YouTube. I think you have to actually log in or something like that when you're doing it through StreamYard. So, well, I hope you don't have any questions. All right, we'll talk to you soon.
Take care.
Sorry, I'm always scared that I'm going to remove somebody off of the stream when I'm doing these. So, next up we have Holley. Next one are you ready? Okay. So Holley, we talked a little bit about your inspiration again. Is there a reason that you specifically picked like the location of like where your actual story takes part? You're still on mute. Did I mute you? Hold on, you're on mute.
I muted me. I'm
Okay.
sorry.
That's okay.
So yeah, I mean, I live in the USA, so I have, like, I see these headlines of the Colorado River running dry and things like that,
Yeah.
and it scares me. And like I said, I wanted something that I think could happen, because for me that's the scariest kind of horror is something that really could happen. And it's hard, I think, at least for me, to sit by every day and see these news stories happen and not to see a lot of push from people to fix it or to deal with the problem. Like, it's easier to ignore than it is to do something about it. So yeah, I mean, for me, I guess my inspiration came from the headlines of the newspaper.
Yeah. Well, it's good. It's terrifying when you can pick something out of the headlines, like you said, and be like, okay, this is literally happening right now. What happens in 30 years when it actually like comes to fruition, right? So I think that is what makes it terrifying, and your take on the different like rich versus poor in the story, I don't want to give a lot of it away, was really unique and interesting too. So I like that. So I'm going to leave this to you. You've got a part of it ready to be read? All right, perfect. Well, then we will see you soon. All right, and here you go.
Okay, so I'm not starting at the very beginning of my story. I'm going to start a few pages in. So we're still in part 1 of the story, but I wanted to get to a little bit of where the action starts. So here we go. This is a section of Carry On. Diamond's eyes flitted open. She sat up, suddenly alert. There had been a noise, a movement. Something had startled her awake. She scanned the room, silently watching. The night was full dark. Although the fire had burned itself out, wisps of smoke still rose from the pile of ashes. She glanced to the window where Python had sat, keeping vigil when last she was awake. His seat was vacant. Diamond held her breath and listened for the sounds between Sal's gentle snoring. She knew what to look for: the scuffle of footsteps, the crunch of gravel beneath boots, the sound of danger approaching. It had been a lifetime since she'd served in the Corps, but her instincts were still razor sharp. Diamond leaned over and gently shook Glitch's shoulder. When his eye opened, she placed a finger to her lips and pointed toward the large window. "Get the others and hide," she signaled. She didn't wait to see if he understood. She pulled her gun from its holster and slunk against the wall to listen. Her heart pounded in her throat. As the fear knotted and settled in her belly, she heard a scuffle, a furtive, uncertain step. Her shaking legs inched her along the wall, closer, soundless. Her mind had shut down, and that animal part of her, the part that knew only survival, opened its eyes. There were 3, maybe 4 of them. At least one by the front door, one on the far side of the window. She didn't have enough bullets to take them all down. If Python went out to check, he was likely already dead. The doorknob rattled and shook. Diamond glanced back into the living room. There was no sign of Glitch and the others. Good. Broken glass crunched under a heavy step. Whoever they weren't trying to be stealthy anymore. It was the stranger's last mistake. Diamond stepped out from cover and fired a single shot in the direction of the sound. A groan and a thud told her she'd hit her mark. A low whistle sounded from the direction of the door. "You'll pay for that one, bitch. Flesh for flesh, blood for blood." She'd killed one at the cost of a precious bullet and the element of surprise. Her only leverage was the gun, and that they had no idea how many bullets she had left. "Leave now and I won't shoot the rest of you." "You ain't gonna do that." The voice was like sandpaper against stone. "Are you willing to bet your life on it? You do anything stupid and we're gonna gut your boyfriend here. We'll peel him apart like a piece of fruit." Diamond peeked through the doorway. Python stood trussed up like a pig waiting for slaughter. His eye was bruised and swollen. The left side of his face was a bloody pulp, but it looked like he'd given as good as he'd got. The man holding him had a busted nose, and he favored his right leg. She couldn't tell if the bruises running down his arms were fresh, but the fat lip definitely was. Beads of sweat slid down her forehead. She needed a plan. She needed to stall. How'd you find us? Saw the smoke from your fire, replied the sandpaper voice. If you come out here and put the gun down, we'll let him live. Hell, we'll even let him watch. Diamond's stomach fluttered. She didn't need to ask what they'd let him watch. The sharp edge of his laughter told her enough. The acidic taste of canned chili crept back up her throat. Python gave them leverage, and they knew it. Or did they? If Python could fuck them up like that, they weren't core, just a bunch of thugs. Diamond knew thugs. She worked with enough of them in her scav days. They were all tough when they had the upper hand, but useless as shit when things went sideways. She just had to deny them the upper hand. Gut him then. When the screaming starts, I'll know just where to shoot. There was a moment of silence where she imagined the rusty gears of the man's brain turning. Was she really such a ruthless bitch? She never had the opportunity to find out just how far she'd let this go. A faded vill swooped in low, arc cut short as it crunched into a kneecap. Hemingway lined up for another swing. Diamond stepped out of the cover and took aim, lodging a bullet in Sandpaper's shoulder a moment too late. Before he crumpled to the floor, the man's knife tore a gash in Python's side. Shit! Grab the first aid kit! Diamond knelt beside Python, ripping his tattered and bloody shirt to put pressure on the wound. The cut was deep, but it didn't look like the knife had hit an artery. If she could stop the bleeding, he might survive. Glitch ran back across the room with the kit they'd found when they raided B6. It was more than just bandages and antiseptic wipes. The kit had the good stuff. Hemingway knelt beside Python and offered him a hand. Squeeze it. Python grunted, taking the offered hand. Hemingway's face went pale as Python squeezed. Diamond threaded the needle and knit her brow. This is gonna hurt, she warned, digging the stitch into Python's side. Python grit his teeth and sucked in a breath. What do we do with this one? Glitch asked, pointing a toe at the groaning figure writhing on the floor. He said it himself, Sal said, unsheathing her knife. Flesh for flesh, blood for blood. Ain't that right, boss? Diamond checked her stitch work, then nodded. It was surprising to her how easy it had become to take another life without batting an eye. Sal jerked the man's head back. With a flick of her wrist, the blade traced a red line across his neck. The sun pressed down, and everything around them seemed to burn. Heat waves rose from pieces of broken road. A hot breeze blasted them, covering them in dust. For miles they'd seen nothing but a few large cacti and the rusted-out carcass of a car baking in the sun. Diamond thought about giving up, admitting that even she had limits. It was too much to ask to lead this group across a desolate wasteland to a place they weren't even sure existed anymore, if it ever really had. New Eden might just be a story parents told their children. It would have been a difficult task even if they had been in peak physical condition. Python's injury was a major setback. He needed time for his wounds to knit, and even then he couldn't ride. The risk of staying put was greater than the risk of moving forward. Python could heal when they got to B8, and they were almost there. They left the bikes behind and walked the rest of the way, bringing only what they could carry. The sooner they were inside the bunker, the better. They had to carry on. What's the first thing you're going to do when we get to New Eden? Glitch asked, falling in step alongside Diamond. Eat something that isn't from a can or a package. Something fresh, she answered. What about you, Sal? Sal was walking alongside Python, who held pressure on his bandaged side as he limped along. When I get to New Eden, I'm going to sit my ass down and rest, is what. I'm tired. Ahead, Hemingway stopped. No one in the group had brought up the attack that night in the shell. No one mentioned the nonchalant way she'd told those men to gut Python, or the fact that Hemingway had been the one to save all their asses. Quiet, soft Hemingway with his books and his stories. The area had once been a major highway, but was now reduced to rubble. Hemingway waved them into the lot of what had been a service station. The doors were removed, and 2 of the walls had either crumbled or been knocked down. The 2 remaining walls cast enough shade for them to rest and regroup. The gas pumps had long since been dismantled, and any fuel that remained taken for vehicles or generators. Glitch unfolded the map and smoothed it out against the crumbled pavement. We need to turn off the main road soon. Sal sighed and wiped sweat from her forehead. We know the drill. Not all of us know, Diamond said, casting a meaningful look at Hemingway. It's his first time. We need to make sure we get it right. There's no room for fuck-ups. Hemingway nodded. What do I need to do? Diamond felt that same sense of creeping unease she'd first felt a lifetime ago when her commanding officer ordered her unit to fire on civilians. The epiphany she'd had back then had been accompanied by a pit opening in her stomach. She couldn't breathe. She couldn't think. Once it might have been called anxiety, and she might have gone to a therapist or a psychiatrist, but now it was just the way things were. Okay, save me, Michelle.
I'm here to save you.
Thank you.
That was a great reading.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think a lot of people will. If anyone has any questions about the reading itself, feel free to post something. Someone was saying they had some issues actually posting. So if my apologies. This is first time we've used YouTube instead of Facebook for a live event in a while. So there might be a little delay or something like that. But what do you think was the hardest part writing this book? Was it like the characters, or was it building a world? What did you find the most challenging?
Well, as I mentioned, this was a challenge for me because I'm not post-apocalyptic is not really my genre. And I've read some, but I've never tried to write it before. So when I was trying to think, I decided the first thing that I wanted to concentrate on is characters, because regardless of whether I knew exactly what I wanted my world to look like, I knew who I wanted the people to be. And I think for me, the hardest thing was balancing how do you make characters that are both likable and sympathetic, but also are strong enough and tough enough to survive in this world where they have to do things like murder people. You know, they have to defend themselves. They have to fight. So they can't be your typical hero where they never do anything wrong. You know, our group in this, our company, you know, they kill people, they attack people, you know, things happen. And balancing that, I think, and making them still be sympathetic people that readers can root for was probably the most difficult thing for me to balance. So I hope you did a good job. I hope if you read it that you like Diamond and her feisty crew. Certainly were fun to go on an adventure with. By the time I was done with this, I was sad to see them go as characters that I really thoroughly enjoyed.
Yeah. Well, Dave says the dialogue is so good in this story. And I agree. I loved how they really communicated with each other, and they were just, it felt realistic, which is what we always love. And Neen, who's a hyperactive bookworm, says, I love the characters' names so much.
I struggled with that. I really did.
It's hard to name characters.
Because I didn't want them to be like, you know, Joe and Sally and you know, because in this world, what are names? You know, what does that matter anymore? And I think there even is a line in the beginning that there's something like names. And names do play a part in the story. You'll find out Diamond, kind of how she came to be Diamond and who she was before she was Diamond. So I'm glad that you mentioned that, because that is important in the story. So thank you.
No, I completely agree. Well, thank you so much for reading this. And I think, I hope a lot of people really appreciate like the amount of detail that you went into it and thought. And again, after we've got, because they can read it as the standalone if they want to buy it just as like a little novelette, they can get it as the book itself, or you can even, the one she's got right there, or you can grab the whole copy. All of it's available on Kindle Unlimited right now as well, which is great. So if you have that subscription, that's something you can read. Emily actually has a question for us. She wants to know what character was easiest to write.
I think the easiest to write for me was Hemingway. So we didn't really get into him very much, but he is a character that he loves to read. He likes art, music, and he kind of symbolizes these things from the past world that Diamond enjoys. Throughout the story, I have him reading The Hobbit, and though it's not called The Hobbit because of copyright reasons.
Yeah, I know. Like, we had to be very careful about what we did and didn't do, right?
Right. So, but that essentially, he's reading this and he adds a humanist perspective to these, like, hard people who have been on, been out like in the world and they've been roughing it for a long time. So I think he was probably the easiest of them all to write because he was kind of a uniting figure and something that was inspiring. So I think that he was the easiest. But again, he doesn't make too much of an appearance in what I read.
Yeah.
But in the story, he's important.
Okay. All right, perfect. Well, thank you so much. Emily says, awesome book, and I completely agree. And Neve is excellent. I love when names mean more, and they do. Like, it's important and it's great. So thank you so much, Holley. I hope everyone who reads this book just really appreciates all the love you put into your characters and like the story itself. So
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. And last but not least, we have Joel R. Hunt. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm really good, thank you.
All right. Now, your story was called Fading Echoes. And yeah. You've got your little copy. I've got that copy here, I think. Oh, I can't find, where is it? I'll find it in a minute. I got this big one.
Yeah.
So it's a part of
can
this.
see both.
Yeah. So what really inspired your stories? All of them are completely different and unique, but your story, for me, was like such an interesting concept. So what inspired your concept for this one? Was there an inspiration behind it?
So I can't remember exactly what it was about the way you'd phrased the kind of initial prompt call. That first kind of paragraph or so that you put out saying that these are the kinds of stories that we want. I can't remember what it was about the phrase, but that I was trying to think what, like I mentioned before, what kind of end of society haven't I personally seen before? And that doesn't mean that it's original. That doesn't mean that it's never been done before. Just that me personally, I've not seen it before. And I was thinking about human beings not being able to create new movements, not being able to create new memories, and that essentially this concept that if you hadn't done it before, from that point on, you can't do that. And that then developed into this concept. Funnily enough, the kind of central concept became a secondary concept. There was the idea of human beings as NPCs, like in video games, non-playable characters, which still features but is kind of secondary now, with a character who won't be appearing in the extract that I'm reading. But that gave this concept of an illness that traps you in your own past, that you can only do things that you've previously done. And obviously, if enough people catch that, society can't carry on because you're not able then to react to the situation in the present.
Yeah. I thought it was just such an interesting and unique concept. I really enjoy it. So I'm going to leave you alone for a minute and you can, well, as long as it takes, and dive right into your story.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Well, thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you. And I will also say, just before I get started, I have my little Eerie River bookmarks. So they were holding place for the extract that I'm going to be reading. Okay. This is partway through chapter 2 of 5. I did chapter 1 in my own personal little reading a couple months ago. So we're doing a part of chapter 2 now. Now that the unrelenting downpour had ended, the next hour was significantly easier, though not without challenges. At parts of their journey, they were wading more than walking, and the chill of their wet clothes was beginning to sink in. More than ever, they needed a dry, warm shelter for the night. It was a relief when they came across signs of civilization, a wall of junk blocking their path. There was no doubt that this was a recent structure, one built after Echo Syndrome had ravaged the planet. Perhaps it had started as a simple composite or chain link fence, Certainly both were evident for stretches of the wall, but over time it had been reinforced with logs and sheets of metal, then further still with old cars and fridges and furniture. Along the top, strewn like tinsel on a Christmas tree, was layer after layer of barbed wire. Katie consulted their map. "This is Old Freetown," she said. "It's right on the edge of Boss Clean's patch. Another day's walk, and we should be beyond the cleansing squads for good." "Wow, you're nearly a grown-up," said Beck. Katie allowed herself a rare smile. "Yeah, it'll be nice not to have to worry about that bastard bearing down on us, won't it? Still, let's not count our chickens." Beck laughed her familiar laugh. After double-checking the map, the pair followed the junk wall back towards the road, settling in amongst a mass of vegetation at the town's main entryway loomed into view. Brick and wooden towers flanked a heavy metal gate, practically ready for a siege. Katie edged closer, crouching beneath a bush and peering through her binoculars. The guard tower was manned by a single sentry, an old man with grey flecking his beard and bags beneath his sunken eyes. She couldn't see from her angle whether he was armed, but he didn't have the sharp zeal of a Boss Clean fanatic. A quick conversation should be safe. "Wait here," she said to Beck. "I'm going to ask him about that shopping mall. Might be a good place to shelter for the night, and stock up for the next leg of our journey." She crawled out from the bush, but Beck grabbed her leg. "The shop? Yeah, you remember the mall we saw. Do you want anything from the shop?" Beck repeated, pointing to the road. Her face was as composed as always, but there was panic in her eyes. Katie followed her gesture, heard the patrol's car engine before it rumbled into view. She ducked back into the vegetation, easing Beck further out of sight and pressing a finger to her lips. Beck didn't need telling twice. Her smile twitched as she held back nervous echoes. From the bushes, Katie watched the armoured truck approach. Few vehicles actually used the roads anymore, and most that did were part of Boss Clean's cleansing squads. Any echo they found would be executed on the spot. Katie held her breath, as if that would help them go unnoticed as the truck drew closer. The windscreen was cloudy with dust, and mud caked the truck's lower half, which Clean would never have permitted. His team must have been patrolling away from their base for days. They might have even fired the shots that Katie and Beck heard that morning. Katie's binoculars dug into her skin as her hands clenched into fists. A single thought dominated her mind. Murderers. The truck pulled up a short distance from the town entrance, revealing 4 cleansers sat in an open bed, wearing the usual gas masks and armoured coveralls. Another clambered out of the passenger seat, rifle slung casually over his shoulder, and sauntered up to the gates. He pulled off his mask and shouted up to the guard tower. "This is Old Freetown, right?" "We paid our dues to the boss last week," the sentry called down. "We're not here for that. We heard some disturbing rumours about your settlement. Rumours that you've been giving sanctuary to echoes. Boss Clean wanted us to eat tonight?" The cleanser froze, seeming surprised by his own statement. He frowned and cleared his throat. "The boss wanted us to check it out," he said, stressing each word. "You know the penalty for harbouring echoes. We wouldn't want to have to burn this place down." To emphasize the threat, another cleanser hopped off the truck, hefting a flamethrower with an air of lazy power. The sentry threw up his hands. "We have no echoes here," he said. "We wouldn't want to risk that kind of infection. In fact, we reported one to you a month ago, remember?" "Ah, yes, the echo who ran away and was curiously never found," sneered the cleanser. "If it's all the same to you, we'll come in and check around anyway. After all, we wouldn't want to. What are we having to eat tonight?" The cleanser covered his mouth, and the sentry leaned in. "Pardon? What are we having to eat tonight?" spat the cleanser from between his fingers. He shook with the effort of keeping the words inside, but they kept coming. What are we having?" Behind him, his fellow cleansers muttered and gestured. He turned to appeal to them, staggering forwards. They took a collective step back. "No, it's not. What are we having to eat tonight? It's not like that. I'm not an echo. What are we... Oh, I don't know. What are we having to eat tonight? No, I'm not an echo. As he rambled, his panicked face settled into a loop, his muscles twitching through the same few seconds of motion over and over. I'm not an echo. I'm not an echo. I'm not an echo. I'm not an echo. In one fluid motion, the cleanser nearest him drew her pistol, raised it level with his head, and pulled the trigger. The sound of the shot tore through the tree line. Katie yelped as his body twitched and collapsed, the muscles of his blood-splattered face still looping that final denial as his brain leaked from his skull. The woman snapped her eyes to the trees, and Katie barely managed to duck out of sight in time. "Did you hear that?" she asked. "Some animal, I think." Katie reached down instinctively to take Beck's hand in hers, but her sister's fingers slipped away. Katie turned to find Beck pacing back and forth, humming an identical loop that somehow seemed louder with each repetition. Her movements were calm, almost leisurely, but Katie recognized her sister's state of panic and knew that spoken echoes were soon to follow. "Beck," she whispered, "I need you to stay calm, okay?" "Parker," came the cleanser's voice, "burn his body. The rest of you, comb the forest." Katie grasped Beck's shoulders, struggling to hold her still as her sister's legs repeated the same few steps over and over. Katie shushed her, but the humming continued. Beck opened her mouth, drew in a breath, swallowed hard. She was losing the battle. "Come on," whispered Katie, pulling her deeper into the vegetation. At the tree line near the road, branches rustled, sending Katie's heart into a wild pounding. The cleansers could cover ground faster than Beck could. Their only hope was getting a good head start before their trail was found. Forcing her sister to keep moving, Katie forged a path directly away from the road. The recent rain helped and hindered in equal measure, the damp silencing any leaves they trampled, but the mud grasped at their feet with every step. From beyond the trees, a voice reached them, distressingly close. "Do those look like footprints to you?" Beck's lip quivered. Her eyes bulged, her body tensed. Like a crumbling dam, the words burst from her mouth. "The shop! The shop! The shop! Through there!" cried the cleanser. "We've got an echo!" Another called back to the truck. "Do you want the shop?" Beck stammered, panic in her eyes. Now that the words were out, nothing could hold them back. Do you want anything from the shop? The shop! The shop!" Katie heaved on her sister's arm, sending her stumbling through the mud. Escape was no longer about guiding Beck through the trees. Katie had to drag her, with Beck barely able to keep herself upright. Her face, caught in a constant loop, was as composed as always, but her eyes were locked in a silent scream. Katie clamped a hand over her mouth, muffling the words as they tumbled out on repeat. It wasn't enough. "Over there! 2 of them!" A crack punctured the air. Over Katie's shoulder, wet bark exploded from a tree trunk. "Idiot!" barked a voice from behind. "Wait till you've got a clear shot!" The cleansers would catch up in moments. Staggering behind an overgrown bush and straining to build up momentum, Katie hurled her arms in an arc, swinging Beck to one side. The sudden change in motion dragged her with it, and she just managed to stay standing. Now they were running directly away from Old Freetown, back in the direction they had come. It wasn't much, but if the cleansers hadn't seen their sudden turn, it would buy them a few moments. In the panic of their escape, there was only one place Katie could think to go. For the next few minutes, the 2 of them kept up their pace, getting as close to a sprint as was possible with Beck's limited movement. Katie's legs burned, and her breath shot out in splinters, but she didn't allow herself to rest. At last, she was rewarded by the trees parting ahead. The shopping complex rose into view. In moments, they would reach the cluttered car park and the endless hiding spots that those rusting wrecks would provide. "Nearly there," Katie gasped, squeezing Beck's hand and beckoning her onward. Stumbling down the hill, they struggled to keep their footing. The grass beneath their feet had turned to a mudslide from days of continuous rain, and Katie had to clutch Beck tight to keep her upright. Her sense of balance had been lost to her echo syndrome years ago. By some miracle, they reached the bottom without falling, but a new danger presented itself as the grass ended in a sheer drop to the tarmac below. It would be an easy hop for Katie, but Beck could barely manage stairs. A jump like this was nearly impossible. "We have to." Beck didn't respond, but her eyes spoke for her, a bright mix of panic and understanding. "I've got you, Beck." Katie grasped her sister's arm tight and stood as close to the edge as she dared. She whispered a countdown into Beck's ear, and just as the cleansers shouted out from the tree line, they stepped off the hill. Katie landed hard on her feet, but Beck's fumbled landing dragged both of them to the ground. Beck landed hard on her arm. As Katie hauled her upright, blood already bloomed from beneath her torn sleeve. "Are you okay?" she asked. Beck staggered on ahead. "Do you want anything? Anything from the shop?" Glancing around and seeing no cleansers, Katie closed the gap between them. At the far end of the road that linked the car park to the dual carriageway, a barricade of junk had been erected. It had the same desperate quality as the walls of old Freetown, but it put comforting distance between them and the patrol truck that would likely soon be dispatched to finish the job, if the cleansers in the woodland didn't catch up first. And I will pause there.
That was great.
Thank you.
Yeah. Then we've got someone said, never heard of a proposed apocalypse scenario like this before the book, but it's definitely very chilling to think about it. And it is.
Thank you.
It was when I first read your scenario idea in the group, I was just like, oof, that's scary. And this is chills. That's an intense reading, Joel. And I agree. You are such a good reader.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, you have a very good reading voice.
Oh, yeah, that's excellent. I used to be an English teacher, and I'm a school librarian now, so I do a lot of reading.
You do a lot of reading.
So I get quite a lot of practice.
Neen goes, holy hell, I feel out of breath just listening to that. And this is a good question. Where did you get the idea for Echoes?
Oh, excellent. Yes. So, like I say, there was originally this idea, and I want to be careful how much I say, because even though it's no longer the main idea of the story, it does still appear. But the original concept I had was essentially, what if human beings became NPCs from video games, that a previously fully conscious and aware sentient human being was reduced to like a background character in their own life. And so originally I was toying around with concepts of like a video game related kind of post-apocalyptic scenario. I don't know what exactly that would have been, like, you know, consciousness uploaded to a machine or whatever. That isn't obviously what I ended up going with. But there is still there is a character who appears later who essentially has a coping mechanism by which he relates things. He relates this particular apocalypse to video games and familiar settings that he is aware of, because that makes it easier for him to, I guess, comprehend what's going on.
Yeah.
So the Echo concept is essentially a mixture of being a video game NPC and a real world, I guess, cognitive deteriorative diseases like, you know, Alzheimer's and dementia, yeah, and conditions like that.
That's very cool. And then someone says, yes, is there a main source of inspiration for your story? So
a similar kind of answer, unfortunately. Yeah, mostly just me trying to think of a type of apocalypse, like I say, that I'd not personally seen before.
Yeah. Well, I love the concept of it, because the thought of that, of being stuck on repeat, or like just reloading is terrifying. So I loved that story, and I love how you weaved it together, and who really is the bad guy, who's the good guy. I enjoyed that a lot. And again, you can grab that in after. You can get it in the big form if you want to grab the book that has all of it. And you can get it Kindle Unlimited or digital, or even the small book You have your little one.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, because for some reason
Sorry.
I can't find it. You can grab the small version if you want to collect all the individual little novelettes individually. You can do that as well. So lots of options available. Oh, here's someone else. Did you see a fantasy cast actors while you were writing this? If not, who would you cast if you could?
So I don't tend to I know for some writers it's really helpful for them. I know some writers kind of think of an actor who could play it before they even really get started. I've that's never been a thing that I've done. But if I'm thinking about kind of ideal actors, this might just be because earlier today I was watching some Game of Thrones reaction videos, but Beck and Katie as Sophie Turner, who's Sansa, and Maisie Williams, who's Arya, I think would be perfect in my head. Maisie as Katie and Sophie as Beck, I think would suit me very well.
Actually, let's bring the other two authors in as well, see if they have someone for their main character. Let's go Chris, and then we're doing Holley. So let's give you guys this question as well. Do you have an actor that you think would play your main characters? And if you do, who would it be?
Not a character, film character, but we in the group, a lot of us did mood boards. I don't know who came up with that idea. That's actually quite useful. I've never actually done it before.
I think it was Jay first.
Yeah, it was a great idea. Running around and just finding things for scenes, for landscapes, for characters. So there were several images. I mentioned there no characters. Couldn't even tell you if they're real people or 3D CGI generated. But there were characters within that became who I was writing for. But it was just picked off the internet. I don't think they're actual real people.
I do. I try when I'm thinking of what I want the character to be. I kind of try to get a picture of who I think would embody what I want that character to look like. For this particular story, I didn't do it with my whole cast, but with Diamond, who is the main character. I pictured her as like a Lisa Monet or like a Zoe Kravitz. And for Python, kind of like Bruce Willis from Die Hard. And those were the two that in my head I had a very clear picture, because I think they're like the two, if I had to say the two major characters, I think that those two carry a heavier load than the rest of the cast. So that's who I would have cast for those roles.
I feel like those work very well. So I could see them in there, so that that makes sense.
Maybe that means I did a good job.
You did a great job. Well, thanks so much, everyone, for coming and reading your stories and sharing these just unique and interesting characters. We've got another question from someone. For all the authors, what's been the most enjoyable part of writing these stories? Anyone can go.
Who's going?
I'll jump in then. So for me, this now I like what the story turned out to be, but as Michelle will recall, this was probably the most challenging writing process for me out of anything I've written, and I'm very grateful that I was given incredible extensions on the deadline, which I'm very grateful for, because I think with everything that's been happening in the world recently, I was kind of knocked off my writer's perch quite thoroughly. So I wouldn't say that there were particularly many enjoyable parts of writing for this, but I think for me, my favourites are there's a character that who appears later than the extract that I read, who's the boy with the coping mechanism that I mentioned. I found him a pleasure to write for. He was such a unique character and not the type of character that I write very often. So he was very fun.
Yeah, yes. I'm like, it gets really dark with him, but I did enjoy that character a lot. I thought it was interesting.
I think for me it was the challenge. As I had mentioned, it's not something I'm used to writing. It's not a genre I've ever written in. So when the initial discussion about what the book was going to be and what the story should be, it was scary. It was like, can I do this? Because I was still a new writer at the time, still finding my voice and figuring out who I was as a writer. And it was a big challenge, but it was one that I'm glad that I accepted, because it pushed me to think about, what I could do and what I should do. And in the end, I think my favorite thing was the characters that I created. I tried to focus on that, and I'm really proud of who they turned out to be.
Yeah, you definitely should. And you definitely rose to the occasion because it was a big ask. And I think everyone did like a fantastic job, just like really building this world, because it wasn't just building a story. You had to build an entire world around it. And think about what happened first and then what happened after and then where we are. So it was a huge ask, and I think everyone did a fantastic job. Chris, did you have an enjoyable part?
Oh, yeah. In fact, I was enjoying myself so much. I was at 25,000 words when I handed it in.
I know. For those that don't know, I asked for like upwards to 15,000. So he was like, I'm going to double it.
So yeah, handed in 25,000 words and then had to cull it a little bit. So I was having great fun world building because short and multiple story arcs being combined together.
Yeah.
Which you really can't do easily in under 10K.
No.
So though that was very, very enjoyable for me.
Good. So what's next for everybody? Joel, do you have anything coming out soon before we say goodbye? Just let us know what's happening. And
so at the moment, there's literally only one thing currently in the pipeline because of aforementioned kind of struggles writing this year. I'm back on the horse now, but obviously the things I'm writing now won't be out for some time.
No
So the only other thing is a project with Simone, who's obviously helped with this and helped to edit the story and had some very, very useful feedback for me. There's another, Simone's working on an anthology. I don't know if the name of the anthology has changed because the publisher we're working with has changed. It was originally called 13 Souls, and that is in its final editing stage. I'm really excited about that. I'm very proud of the story. I've contributed to that and some of the other stories. I've not read all of them yet, but some absolutely incredible work from the other authors who are involved in that. So I'm very excited about that one.
That's exciting.
Hopefully it will be announced. If it's not been formally announced yet, hopefully it'll be announced formally in the next kind of month.
Perfect. Chris, what are you up to?
So I got a few books that have just come out. Death Beyond from Breaking Rules Europe, who many of us know.
Yeah.
So that's a
Good
science
friends.
fiction, and a very strange story in there. What else? Doors is coming out in a few weeks' time.
Yes, it calls from the doors. You've got a story in there that's coming
really
out October 15th.
Yeah. K is for Kidnap, from Red Cake Publishing as well. That's out shortly. And I'm working on a couple other projects, group projects that might see the light of day this year, or probably not. Let's be honest. All of them seem to be drifting, and then a sequel to Heart of Thorns, which should be out next year sometime.
That's exciting.
Yeah, news to you.
I know.
It's all the stuff you got me to cut out.
Yeah. I think we're gonna have to talk more about that, about like what we're hopefully gonna go for it with. But I think I loved Heart of Thorns, and I think I think the idea of expanding that universe into additional books is gonna be awesome. So I'm really excited.
Do you mind if I ask? So is the plan to have, because obviously now that universe has had a couple of kind of longer short stories in it.
Yeah.
would the plan be for like a collection of short stories in that exploring that universe, or would it be for a novel?
So the story arc that I originally had that wouldn't fit, certainly wasn't going to fit in the 25k that I did deliver. Certainly runs to another book, but there was 10k that disappeared out of the first story, short story, that never got written. So I might go back and address that one. So there's 3 equal chunks at that point of 3 chapters, so to speak.
It's going to be fun. Yeah. I guess we're going to find out what happens.
Yeah.
Holley, what are you up to?
On Halloween, I am a part of an all-women anthology called Don't Break the Oath, which is coming from Candisha Press. So
cool.
I hope you guys will check that out. My story in that is called The Groom of Lorelei. I'm also in the 13 Souls project that Joel mentioned that's headed up by Simone Green. I'm a part of an anthology which is led by the lovely David Green called Whiskey Pete's, which is now, I believe, an Eerie River anthology. I'm not sure when our projected publication is, but
it's going to be
I know
soon.
it's
I'm working on the cover.
I'm
working on the cover as we speak.
I'm also heading up my own shared world anthology, which we're in the revision stage of now. So it will either come late 2021 or maybe early 2022, depending on how the editing stage goes and comes together. It's really exciting. It's kind of Southern Gothic. We have a really great cast of authors, and I'm excited to present that to the world. And then I guess the last thing I'm working on is editing and finishing up a novella based on a short story I had written quite some time ago that was published through Eerie River's first anthology. It calls From the Forest. So Forest Man is becoming a novella, and it's coming together very well. So hopefully I'll have that ready to start submitting to publishers in maybe 2022.
I know you've got, it seems like we all have a lot of, at least something on the books coming out, which is exciting. So I'm happy for all of you guys getting all these things, awesome things happening. And Emily wants to know if we would revisit these places again. I'm talking to a couple of the different authors where I think that some exploration can be done with their stories if it can be expanded on. And that's behind the scenes, we're kind of talking about the realistic opportunities for that. Not everyone is going to get, we're not going to be expanding every single one, but we are talking, if someone has an idea, they can come to me about it. And then we can have an actual conversation. But some of them are being like Chris's is going to be, for sure, we're going to be looking at making it a little bit bigger, as well expanding the story to another book completely. So that's exciting. But thank you so much, everyone, for joining me. Again, After right now is available in digital, and you can also get it paperback and hardcover, and it's on Kindle Unlimited. And for those that enjoy our books, we do have In Solitude's Shadow. This is on sale right now for 99 cents. This is I'm looking at the back for it to say dark fantasy. It doesn't say that. This is a dark fantasy by one of our authors, David Green, who this is a first in series. There's going to be a second one coming out. This was 99 cents for a couple more days. And we're really excited about that one. And Doors, as was mentioned earlier by Chris, It Calls from the Doors is coming out October 15th. And we actually have a pre-order special. We've never done a pre-order this low before. It's only $1.99, and it's going to stay that price. I think I'm going to actually end up staying it all the way until Halloween, because you know what? It's spooky month, and everyone needs a little bit of spooky in this month, I feel like. So it's going to be $1.99 all month if you want to pre-order now or get it closer to Halloween, by all means. But that one is coming out, and we've got 19 stories by 18 different authors, and it's got a foreword by Dave Jeffries. So it's an amazing collection. I hope everyone gets it. But again, thank you all for tuning in and listening to us read, and thank you authors for being here. It's been a blast. So yeah, thanks so much. I'm going to put the little video on for a second, but thank you.
Thank
Have a
you.
great one.